you may be correct,
Oh, good.
100%, by, in terms of the explanation that you presented. There are certainly many others within the realm of quantum physics, which of course is a very mysterious world in and of itself, and it is highly theoretic. The question is whether or not this phenomenon, as well as many other phenomena, like the near-death experience, poltergeist, mediumship, ESP, non-locality, you name it. How do we explain all of this? And there is some validity in varying ways to all of these phenomena, which may be interrelated. And quantum physicists, many leading quantum physicists like Max Planck and Wigner and Einstein considered it spooky action at a distance. He wasn't a big fan of quantum physics or the holographic theory. But the point is, there are many theories out there that have yet to be realized or validated firmly and embraced, accepted by the mainstream scientific community. They may be right at some level, they may be completely wrong, but we can't help but speculate as to what might be going on. How do we explain, in other words, the types of phenomena which the UFO phenomenon and its associated topics incorporates with everything else. One common theory is the holographic principle of quantum physics, or the synchronized universe model proposed by Swanson. But they all essentially share very common things, even along the lines that you eloquently spoke about earlier. And we're talking about what? Subatomic particles, electrons and photons, these elementary particles of energy, electromagnetic radiation, in other words. They communicate with each other despite their vast distances. And in other words, they contend that it's all interconnected, all interrelated. There are no things, in other words, just as they put it, energetic types of events. And in fact, the quantum physicists go so far as to say that many contend that our brains, mathematically construct a physical reality by interpreting frequencies that occur from another dimension. Which transcends, so to speak, time and space, which is obviously hard to grasp, understand, and interpret and apply to the phenomenon. But here again, the brain, many physicists contend, acts like a hologram. And this interrelated connection among subatomic particles, of which, of course, we are composed of. And if this strange behavior of subatomic particles exists within our brain, then it might potentially explain the phenomenon of non-locality, or the perception of reality beyond our five senses. Accessing, in other words, maybe different times and spaces or other dimensions, and ties into the multiverse theory, which many physicists like Kaku and Stephen Hawking, Bohm and Green, they ascribe to that. Are they right? Maybe, maybe not, but it is certainly very interesting. But we can't help ignore the enigmatic behavior of these subatomic particles, which behave differently based on whether or not someone is actually observing it. And we can go into more detail about it, but I don't think it's appropriate here and now. But the point is, there is this observer effect. Why do these particles behave differently depending upon one's observation of them? Or they act as a wave or a particle, in other words, based on whether or not they're being observed. And if they behave in these strange, mysterious, inexplicable ways, what does that mean for our brain, which is also, again, composed of the same particles. I've spoken to too many people, much more sane than I, who have had these experiences of non-locality, sensing information that's proven to be valid later on, that again goes beyond their five ordinary senses. So we see too many examples of that. And maybe we can explain ESP, telepathy, clairvoyance, apparitional experiences, near-death experience, in part, or maybe fully, on the basis of quantum physics, or along the lines that you spoke of earlier. It's hard to make a firm conclusion, and it's certainly wise to speculate, try to connect the dots, and I'm trying to do that in my new book on the afterlife, life after death,
Oh,
which
wow.
which ties us all together. You can't help but ignore certain aspects of quantum physics in trying to possibly explain the possibility of postmortem immortality. Does our consciousness persist beyond or after brain death? Is our consciousness not the brain or dependent on the brain? So there are these many controversial opinions that do exist. And, what is I? We have not adequately identified where in the brain. We have that concept of self-awareness, that I, the essence of my location in space, of being aware of the fact that I am aware. We don't know how the brain does that. There are various theories, of course, on that, but we have more questions certainly than answers about that.
Yeah. Now, I'm the way that I got into this area originally was simultaneously both through parapsychology and through extraterrestrials, classic extraterrestrial and ufological studies. And the parapsychological side, of course, studies psi, but it also studies reincarnation studies, afterlife studies in terms of hypnotic regression to soul memories of the afterlife, and Dr. Ian Stevenson's work done at the University of Virginia Medical School in terms of reincarnation work, and there and that and there's a whole side of exopolitics and contactee work that ties into reincarnation. For example, the case of Suzanne Hansen that I've followed very closely, who is the head of UFO New Zealand, who first met the soul of her future son aboard a gray ship when she was 8 years old. And then a fast forward to where she was married and pregnant, brought aboard the ship, and a group of specialized grays brought in the soul of her son, and a specialized gray did a kind of an embedment ceremony and embedded the soul of her son in the fetus that was in her womb, so that and that's how the son incarnated into the fetus. And he's now a 30-plus-year-old lawyer in New Zealand, leading the life that the Greys downloaded to her he would lead. So that's a part of exopolitics, ufological studies, etc. So these are all allied fields, I think, as you stated. I wondered if you could comment on that, and is that the sort of database that you're using for your afterlife book?
I'm certainly looking at all related phenomenon like reincarnation, apparitional experiences, mediumship, quantum physics, brain and consciousness studies, among others. And the with no firm conclusion, of course, you can't help but be stimulated and moved by the collective evidence across all of these various topic areas that might have some all-encompassing theory that explains possibly these types of phenomena. And regarding Ian Stevenson, certainly his work has been subject to criticism, but it doesn't mean that he has not validated past life recall, primarily in young children, 3 years of age on up to 8, and then they tend to lose uh, reported past life recall. And the question is whether or not their recall is in fact reflective of a past life existence, or as some critics contend, it may simply be a super psi, ESP related, as I'm sure you are aware. In other words, we tap into the memory of that past life that might still persist in this dimension, and what we may be experiencing is somehow obtaining that information. So it's more possibly non-locality, perceiving that information that might exist in the Akashic records, or some information field, some global consciousness, as some people refer to as. But there are a number of studies, like the Global Consciousness Project, other experimental evidence with individuals and people who meditate, where they focus their attention on a single event and alter random event generators that are considered to be 1,000,000,000 to 1 against chance of it happening. And it's predictive. In other words, the 9/11 unfortunate incidents, these random event generators stationed worldwide, analyzed by a supercomputer at Princeton University, suddenly showed a significant deviation in randomness hours prior to 9/11. And also the same a significant event change occurred hours prior to the tsunami incident in Indonesia, hours prior to other global events. And we see this predictive nature or mind over matter occurring in the form of physical systems like random event generators. But the point is that has also been seen in other types of experiments that involve EEG activity, electrocardiac activity, whereby by some researchers note dramatic changes in physiologic measures prior to the actual event taking place, as if somehow the body, mind can sense a future event. So we see parallels, consistency of this kind of non-local effect. How to interpret it, how to grasp it, make sense of it is another thing. But this is, again, an area of study worthy of consideration by the scientific community, which obviously is largely ignored, like ufology is largely ignored, which is very unfortunate, because there can potentially be very significant implications on both an individual and societal level if we can better understand the underlying principles, which we don't have yet. Eventually, hopefully, someday we may, but we're just scratching the surface. We know nothing. Everything is basically theoretical at this point in time, but we see hints, we see glimpses of activity, paranormal-like or anomalous activity, meaning we can't explain it using scientific principles. And we see evidence of this in so many different ways. I have no doubt that this anomalous activity exists. What it means, of course, is something else, just like the UFO phenomenon. It is real. UFOs are real. And I will go so far as to make that firm conclusion. Beyond that, I can't make any other
I
firm
can't make any clue.
conclusions.
Now, let me ask. This may seem like a frivolous question, but I will ask it anyway. And actually, it's the second time in 2 days that I've asked it. You use the term ufology, and as and that's a term that I don't encounter much recently, because I've always now used the term exopolitics, having written a book back in 2000 of that term, because I posited that, oh, well, look, there's, if you trace it back, this relates to intelligent civilizations, and on Earth we call it anthropology. So let's call it exopolitics, and ufology is a term that because UFO was invented by the Air Force as part of the disinformation program to cover it up, because they knew perfectly well what they were doing. They were trying to pigeonhole it and put it where nobody could find it. That perpetuates the ghettoization, the intellectual and social ghettoization of this whole study and consideration. And so now it's not perfect, but it was actually named Word of the Year in 2006 or so. And exopolitics is now a science. It's coming into being, and it's a science of intelligent civilizations in the multiverse, or, and you can find other words, but you get the thing is that we're if we widen just the labels of what we're talking about, do you think that I've raised an issue that makes a difference, or is this like arguing about something that's just too arcane? It's just ufologists versus exopoliticians.
I don't know. It's a reasonable question. It comes down maybe to a little bit about semantics and defining criteria of what we mean by exopolitics and ufology and how they may be interrelated. But yes, there is disinformation campaigns going on. There's no question about that. People in the know aren't going to share it with the general public. We know that. Whether or not there's underground bases with beings there, who knows? As some people will contend there is. There may very well be, but we hear about these kinds of cover-ups and conspiracy theories, MJ12 documents. Is it valid? On and on and on. But the key is we can continue to debate these separate issues forever, and we won't make much progress, I think, doing so. It's interesting, it's stimulating. I think we should engage in it, and I commend you and other individuals who continue to do research in this area. I applaud your efforts, but I still think we need to focus attention, again, as I said earlier, in a different way in order to try to make more sense of what is going on. And here again, maybe free, our foundation is on the right track, maybe not. But we have to try. We have to try to gain more understanding through self-reports of experiences, and possibly provide that information to greater minds who may be able to make more sense or develop an all-encompassing theory that might help to explain it, and possibly tie that into other related phenomena or anomalous activity. And we see evidence of that all over the place. And the point is, what does it all mean? Are we being visited by non-humans who have a grand plan? Are they trying to raise the consciousness and spirituality on a one-by-one basis so that at some point in time we'll be much better, be a much better planet than before? Hopefully, and whatever is behind it, keep doing it because based on our
Let-
evidence, it's having a positive effect on the vast majority of people. So,
right, right. Uh, just going here, I'm looking at your phase one, looking at some of the questions, and here, question 15: have you seen an intelligently controlled craft in the sky or on the ground that was not man-made? And 77 plus percent, 78% answered yes. So that is out of your 2,200 respondents, 77% are saying, yes, I've seen an intelligently controlled craft in the sky or on the ground. What does that mean? What's the larger significance of that in your mind?
well, that's an excellent question because these binary answers, yes, no, one to five, they provide some information, but not complete information. So unfortunately, I can't give you a proper answer, but it does indicate something. Now, what we are doing is following up with those individuals to have them describe in much greater detail, which they have already, and we're in the process of analyzing it, and hopefully we can come back with the final verdict, so to speak, at some point in time when we're done with the analysis. In order to answer that question, yes, we want to find out what does that mean. And that's why we're asking them to elaborate. And I'm analyzing this information on a qualitative software program, NVivo, and we have literally over 5,000 Word documents, individual Word documents of information, whereby we have obtained much more descriptive information of their experience in response to many of these kinds of questions. For instance, 43% that they said they recall being on an ET craft, and 57% said they had contact with an ET aboard the craft, and 32% that they said they had that contact more than 10 times. It's not common that it's a repetitious experience, and also that it occurs within the same family. So here again, that information is important, but we're trying to gather more in-depth understanding through their responses to these binary kinds of responses.
Now, I just want to follow through with a series of questions because my interest is really piqued, and I hope that's okay. Ray mentioned that you sent out, let's say let's say around 3,000 questionnaires to leading researchers and authors in the field. And so these are responses from those questionnaires or from people that those questionnaires were subsequently forwarded to?
We sent them the questionnaires so that they could advertise it on their websites, at
I see.
conferences, on radio shows, to generate responses from the audience.
Good, great. So this is so that this was widely advertised within what I would call the UFO and paranormal community. People who are interested in these topics. I mean, the audience in Coast to Coast is 20 million people. up to 20 million people.
Right.
So what do you informally estimate as the audience of eyeballs, of people who actually saw this, do you think? Rough estimate, would you guess?
I I I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I talked about it on Coast to Coast with George Knapp last summer.
Yeah.
Uh, we
Yeah.
got
So
a lot of
probably
from
you.
that. I'm going to be on the show again in May, and obviously there are millions of listeners, but they are also oftentimes a majority may be biased in terms of their belief in UFOs,
Yeah.
and yeah, and we have to be very
No.
careful
No.
about
But
that.
this was a very wide, i.e., it was a very wide signal that you sent out. Conservatively, I would put a conservative estimate of 10 to 15 million people may have heard of this. I mean,
I agree.
I
Yeah, I think
just guessing.
that would not surprise me. Yes.
Yeah. And so out of 10 to 15 million to get a response of 2,200, was that it?
Hmm.
You are getting, does that conform to other data that is to other contactee data and studies? I think that what was it, 6% reporting having contactee experiences.
I don't know for sure. It's hard to make comparisons between studies. There's so few in number,
Uh-huh.
that, and the methodology is so vastly different. It's maybe comparing apples and oranges. I don't know.
Right.
But of the millions of individuals who have heard about this study, certainly a very small percentage is expected to have had direct experiences. Plus, you might suspect that the majority don't even want to respond for whatever reason, even though we maintain anonymity. But a lot of these individuals are very reluctant to communicate about it, while others are willing to. And some are very distressed or embarrassed by it, and thus are going to be reluctant to respond for whatever reason. So it's hard to get a percentage value in this along the lines you're mentioning. Although it's a very good question. It's like how many UFOs are unidentified, so to speak.
Yeah.
We go to various studies, but Blue Book, Condign, on, and you get to 5 to 10% are unexplained. Who knows? All you need is one that's valid out of 10 million, and you
Wow.
prove it, right? But but
Yeah, but the judging from all of the data that Ray gave, the individuals, at least in phase one, were individuals that have in-depth experiences. It's just not, oh, I saw a light in the sky. These are individuals that have in-depth experiences about in-depth topics, including the afterlife and spiritual transformations and all sorts of stuff.
indeed, and that's what is unique about our research, because it covers so many different topic areas, essentially 6 different themes. Of each theme consists of, over 40, 50 questions.
Right.
And we are maintaining that same topic themes throughout our surveys, in the qualitative phases of our information, which we will later follow up with in-depth interviews. So there's actually 4 phases to our research study, both quantitative and qualitative. And we're into the qualitative phase now. But but you certainly can't ignore the depth of experience and, of course, the life-changing transformation that the vast majority contend to have.
Yeah. No, and I'm pursuing a particular thread in my line of questioning,
Hmm.
and and the thread is this, and and this is just what comes up for me, because the hypothesis is that there are interdimensional and extraterrestrials, intelligent civilizations out there of scientists. We're primarily visited by ET scientists who are conducting experiments on us. Excuse me, erase the word primarily. We, among other things, we're visited by scientists, and the universe also is involved in developing us as a species and our souls and our understanding and culturally and awarenesses. So my question is this: by designing with the 6 topic areas and the themes, you have put out, or you may have put out, a dragnet that reached into and collected the subjects and participants in a specific domain of extraterrestrial experimental subjects, as it were. Those that had experienced very deep ET, quote, spiritual upgrades. I'm using language that just kind of comes to me. I haven't, you see, i.e., the sample that you're getting there is a sample of you know, of people who that is, there's a way of looking at the data in which you examine not only the participants, but you go over and look at the ET side of things, or the interdimensional side of things, and say, okay, who were the ETs involved in this and why were they doing this? And maybe the 2,200 are part of a single experiment, you know, that may have lasted 15 or 20 years, but they're all participants in that wave of an experiment by a particular ET or interdimensional civilization. Because I've engaged in sky watches here in Vancouver and in sky watches down at the Iseti Ranch, which is in the Cascades, so we're in a similar area, and interdimensional craft appear and communicate telepathically in both, and they could be the same civilization with the same outreach. So, you know, with the same kind of intent. So I'm thinking that it was your questions, by designing those questions, you may have reached into and actually captured the participants in the deepest and most spiritual and gotten their profile. You know, and then, well, David Jacobs may have reached in and either skewed the data or reached in and gotten disaffecteds or people, you know, because I have people here who call me up, I've put them on the air, who call me up and they're absolutely terrified and say that they're ETs who want to do the most horrible things to humanity. And I say, well, it could be that you're being bombed by psychotronic weapons, or it could be that they're really ETs. I don't know. But I'm just trying to articulate, as a person who's confronted by your very powerful data, and trying to, you know, and trying to understand, well, who's on the other side of that data, and you know,
you're exactly right.
Did we run into a single class? Like, is this the class of the deep experiencers of, you know, the 21st century, you know, from 2000?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a excellent point. I agree with you completely. It's certainly not a heterogeneous population. The questions in and of themselves target that specific population. Certainly,
Mhm.
it's bias in that regard, but in a good way because we wanted to extract these types of individuals who have had this experience to
Right.
understand better. Right. Now, David Jacobs and other researchers certainly have a different methodology, different questions, different objectives, and thus, like you mentioned, they're tapping into a different uh, population base, and thus we may see dissimilar responses between our results and others because of the different population that we are targeting or are responding to us. Um, uh, who knows what's the right approach, but we tend
Well,
to believe that we're on the right target.
there is no right or wrong. This is science. I mean, we're really searching and trying to understand. Uh, but it is very interesting that with these very powerful positive messages coming out from many different studies, both on the hybrid side, on the experiencer side, that we still have a prevalence of out there in the kind of the internet and the meme sphere of all the negativity. I'm just wondering where that's from.
I'm not entirely sure. People generally are afraid of the unknown. The UFOs are obviously unknown, and it does evoke some degree of fear in people who are threatened by it for whatever reason. But based on our data, obviously, it's generally a very, very positive experience. Although initially, when you see an ET in your bedroom or elsewhere, you can't help but be extremely fearful, and most people are. Certainly, it's understandable. But over time, through repeated experiences, they realize it's a positive one, and that's why approximately 90% or a little more than that even don't want their experiences to end, surprisingly. So it's not negative. It is in some cases, but that's a very small percentage. Likewise, we're trying to also correlate the type of entity observed, of which there are, of course, many different types, human appearing being the most common. Obviously, the robotic like androids, small grays and large grays, and insectoids, reptilians, you go down the whole list, right? And there's others, spiritual or energetic forms even, trying to correlate the type of being reported with the type of experience incurred to see if there is possibly a relationship, as well as whether or not this so-called alien breeding program, hybrid babies we keep hearing about. John Mack talked about that certainly in his books and his experiences with individuals who he did research on, which I believe is a population base of about 300 or so that he did hypnotic regression on. But initially a skeptic, he came away a believer and obviously had to fight for tenure with the Harvard administration, who denounced his efforts. Uh, nevertheless, the big issue here is that there's not only a physical component to the phenomenon, meaning that this thing can do a 90-degree turn at 12,000 miles per hour and mitigate the laws of inertia and gravity that we don't have scientific principles to adequately explain. But there is what Hynek said, Vallée said, John Mack said, a psychic, a mental component to it that is often ignored by the general I won't use the term ufologist, but researchers in the field, they tend to ignore that and focus again on the nuts and bolts, which, as I said earlier, is important, but it's only a very small piece of the puzzle. And we now have to I say get away from that. In other words, all I keep hearing about is, file a report with Peter Davenport or this organization or that or MUFON. Did you see a UFO? And give details about the physical nature of the experience to see to do what's the objective here. In other words, to determine if it's unidentified or not. Excuse me, but who cares? Okay, I've had enough of that kind of exploration. They are real. They exist. Let's stop focusing on that objective and focus more on, and I'm sorry for any redundancy here, but the main message is the essence of the experience, how it impacted the person, not only physiologically, especially when they're having sperm or their eggs, removed for whatever potential genetic manipulation might be occurring, as some contend, and many people in our surveys contend that that indeed was the case. But that doesn't happen as frequently as the literature suggests it does. It's more of a spiritual consciousness type of outcome. And there is a major psychological effect that's occurring that's being ignored. And we have to understand what that's all about. I don't have a clue. People say they do. I doubt it. It's only speculation, and that's fine to speculate what's going on. But we have to begin somewhere. And as far as I can tell, there hasn't been research done to the extent that we have in terms of population size, number of questions, topics that are addressed, that combine quantitative and qualitative information from the same individuals who, again, let me emphasize, have at least reported to have conscious recall, not hypnotic regression, not lucid dreaming, etc., and who have reported that, in other words, to have no history of mental illness. Now, obviously, a certain percentage of our population, is not on the up and up, if you know what I mean, and you have to account for that. We cannot employ standardized psychological test batteries. It's way too expensive to do so in order to administer it, to get a comprehensive psychological profile of our subject population. So we have to rely on their admission about any history of mental illness or treatment that they may have received. And we do ask those questions, and we follow up with them about that. Now, could they be lied to us? Of course. But when we talk about thousands of individuals, and we have yet to obtain the complete data set, we're far from done with our research, and we hope to have many, many more thousands of individuals who respond, and we anticipate that to be the case. When you have such a large database with a consistency of responses, that's hard to ignore. Now, yes, people will criticize it for a number of different reasons, and shoot down the validity for several varying reasons. And I too question it. I'm a scientist. Many scientists will discount it, or question its validity and reliability, and within reason you can, but you can dispel that to some extent, maybe to a large extent, by looking at the large number and the consistency of responses, which add greater validity to the conclusions that may be drawn from the results, which to date seem quite compelling.
Right. Are you prepared to make any tentative conclusions or share directions that you're looking at, or?
I appreciate that question, and again, my objective training as a researcher, tells me not to
Right.
cross a line. Wait till all the data's in,
Right,
all
sure.
the analysis before you make any firm conclusion. All I'll say is that certainly something profoundly unexplainable is happening. What governs it remains the major question, and I have no clue. But I will say with 100% certainty, there is a phenomenon that exists that is affecting people's lives significantly. What causes it is certainly a matter of speculation. Your theory can certainly be right. It could fall within the realm of quantum physics or something completely different, or it may be just a manifestation of some phenomenon of the human mind that we don't understand, or maybe it's some covert operation by some specialized access program for whatever reason, for disinformation. Who knows? Who knows? And it's all a matter of conjecture. But here again, it shouldn't be just free doing this. Science should be involved. Psychologists, sociologists, as I said earlier. Why it's not taken more seriously by mainstream science, we have ideas certainly why, but it's unfortunate that it is not. In my book, before I became involved with free, I called for this need to have a governance structure that provides the resources, both human and fiscal in nature, to develop a multidisciplinary scientific approach to studying the UFO phenomenon. And then for some strange reason, maybe synchronistically, I did radio shows about the book and was heard by Ray Hernandez, who has done just an outstanding job providing the necessary leadership along these lines. And then I eventually wound up on the board of directors and research team. And I'm very happy to do so, because I do feel like what I was advocating in my book, I'm now a part of. But it can't be limited to just the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. And I'm not crazy about that term, by the way, but because it may not be extraterrestrial in nature. But it may be, or a combination of different sources. But the point,
you could also say extraterrestrial or extra dimensional.
Exactly, exactly, and there are numerous theories, as you very well know. And if I may, commend you for all your very important contributions to
thank
this field. And we need more, people like you asking the questions that you do and trying to uncover this mystery that many of us are wrapped in. And why we are, I don't know. Why most individuals aren't, it's curious, but we are all different in nature with different interests, certainly. Nevertheless, this is up my alley. Now that I'm retired, I feel like I have another part-time job.
It seems like this field is populated by retired intellectuals who've had multidimensional experiences, among others.
Yes, indeed.
Well, tell me, are there salient points that you haven't been able to bring up yet that you would like to make for our audience about this study?
Yeah.
I am so impressed by the significance of this, and really want to get that out, and that this significant study is ongoing, because I know this is like the gift that's never going to stop giving. From my point of view, I know exactly how this is going to fit into my future work as a research source. I mean, I'll be footnoting you and quoting you, and it's very instructive and supportive of many of the hypotheses that I've been, and it enriches a lot of the work that I've been doing. So I'm extremely grateful for your work, and I'm going to be continually observing this. And I just wanted to state that.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and so please place us on the hotline as to, when things come up, so that we can have you and Ray on as events develop. So tell us, are there things you'd like to point out
Well,
at this stage?
we covered certainly a great deal of ground. I would encourage your audience to visit the website experiencer.org.
Mm-hmm.
And if they believe that they have had such unique encounters with non-humans or UFOs, to consider completing our surveys. They can look at my website, the UFOphenomenon.com. I have a lot of literature there about my books, and they can communicate with me. Certainly, I'd be very happy to do so and discuss their insights about this. I just want your audience to know that I don't have the answer. Everybody listening wishes they would get the final verdict. That may not come in our lifetime, if ever. All I can say for you debunkers out there, don't debunk. I think you should be skeptical. We should all be skeptical at some level. Don't interpret everything you hear literally, read literally. There's a lot of nonsense out there, a lot of good sense out there, and it's hard to decipher what to believe and what not to believe. And that's part of the problem with the field of ufology, which again may not be the best way to phrase it. But unfortunately, it leaves the public yearning for answers and confused in the process when they study the whole encompassing issues from Roswell to Free. It's hard to make sense of it all, other than something is going on that's fundamentally profound, has significant implications yet to be realized, and we may have to certainly alter many of our scientific principles in order to fully understand, interpret what actually is being experienced by so many people worldwide for centuries, if not forever.
Thank you. Very, very moving. Well, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Ray for taking your time out to be here today, and for all of your hard and continuing work in this area. You're undertaking a groundbreaking study. We're all following it. We all understand the importance of it. We here at Exopolitics TV will be broadcasting it widely through our publications, News Inside Out. And we look forward to your coming on again at the next juncture of your findings, because disclosure is the key. At this point in humanity's development and the development of this planet, I mean, our directions are evolution or devolution. and the evolutionary side is so dependent on disclosure. And that's why the negative forces have been trying to shoot down disclosure. And I think that the study that you're doing here is an integral part of disclosure, saying, look, these are the deep-seated things that are happening. This is what the governmental authorities should be disclosing about the ET presence. All of these issues. And so in the description of this video, we're going to be accompanying a long article with links to all of your studies, with major findings in the articles, and so everybody will be able to enter into the ongoing study, because I believe that this is disclosure, and this is what the authorities should be doing. And I guess it's we citizens that are doing it now, because they've defaulted and they've made it part of politics, political issues rather than scientific and social and community issues. So, thank you so much, and keep up the good work is what we can say.
Thank you very much. Very well said, and it's a pleasure to be on your exceptional show. And thank you very much for all you have done again in the field. And Ray Hernandez, if I may just end on this note, should be credited with really providing again that necessary leadership and governance structure to make this happen successfully. And he's the force behind it all. And we look forward again to appearing on your show at any time that may be convenient for you. So thank you again very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Good night.
Good night.